What's up, crew? Welcome to Filming in Progress, the show that takes you backstage into the world of local businesses and the people who make them shine. Please welcome Joni Avram, the founder of Cause and Effect Marketing, whose pioneering approach connects social science with mission-driven marketing. Joni is dedicated to helping brands become forces for good. Joni, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, you're welcome.
What is social purpose marketing?
It relates to how we talk about things that are big ideas and big problems that we're trying to solve. You know, it can be things related to, things like the environment, and it can be related to things related like mental health. It could be around how do we work together to create better outcomes for people who are marginalized. It's a whole variety of things. And the audience, and people often think about social purpose marketing or purpose-driven marketing about it sort of being strictly around for a not-for-profit organization, but it also engages the for-profit world, governments. For-profit organizations often want to integrate a purpose into their brands, and so helping them understand how to do that. And then the other piece of this is understanding like cause and effect part of the equation, because a lot of people think, oh, we're just going to solve homelessness this way, or we're going to change the way people think about racism by doing this. And oftentimes those solutions cause more problems than they solve. They do more harm than good. And so helping people understand the process of actually affecting change is what I'm involved in.
Amazing. What first drove you to this world of purpose-driven marketing?
Well, I always say everything you need to know about me is I grew up in a small town in Saskatchewan. And so there really was a sense of community. And I remember growing up and kind of watching the adults do stuff. And it seemed like they just solved problems themselves. Nobody rang their hands and went, oh, we need to call in the government, or we need to help somebody to help us. And so I think I just picked up that it was possible to do big things with a committed group of folks, and it never occurred to me that you couldn't do what you can do in a small town, you can do in a big city. It just requires a few more people. And so that kind of is how I was wired and kind of the world I grew up in. And ever since then, going through university, and I chose to go to law school, never wanted to practice law, always thought, you know what would be cool is to work in the court of public opinion, and that's what I've done. And so taking what you learn in law school, which is a fabulous education, and then applying it into the public realm, into the social marketing, public relations marketing space, actually for me has worked out really well. And I've worked a bunch in public advocacy. I did a lot of work with organizations who wanted to get regulatory approval for certain things, or who wanted to change the way we did healthcare, or I worked in politics. You know, I've done a whole variety of things. And so when I was deciding, when I started having kids and I started wanting to be a little more independent, I thought, my vision was to work with people who want to change the world. And so I ended up working with a lot of people in the philanthropy space, foundations, not-for-profits, or corporations. And then from there, I just kind of fell into this work that's really, really specific to social purpose marketing. I really enjoy I always say every business is a social business. They just don't always know how to talk about what they do. And so helping businesses understand that, but then helping not-for-profit folks and people who are in that change the world space really figure out how to get it right. I don't know that I actually decided to do any of this. I feel like I just kind of fell into it and it felt right for me. And I have a real I'm very idealistic. I'm a real booster. I really believe in people. I'm a big fan of humanity. And I just believe that we, are capable of more than we think. And so all of that kind of has gone into why I've chosen to work in the kind of work that I do, and do the kind of, I do a lot of campaign type stuff. And I just, all the things that I've done in the past have sort of laddered up to help me do that work really efficiently and effectively. And I can do everything from soup to nuts, and I'm a bit of a unicorn that way. And I guess it just suits me. I'm creative. I'm very strategic. I'm a good writer, good communicator. So it's just kind of all layered up to say this is the place I think I should be.
Amazing. Do you find that the businesses and the people that you work with are typically in tune with their purpose or their why? Or is what you do help them find that?
I would say most organizations, whether they're for-profit or not-for-profit, really don't have a great handle on their why or their how. They know oftentimes, a lot of organizations that I've ended up working with know that they're doing great things. They're just kind of on the cusp of like exploding, but they haven't taken the time to really examine why. What's going on underneath that people really are attracted to and compelled by. And it's that process of helping them discover who they are and then holding up the mirror and going, this is who you are, that makes them go, oh, wow. It's not like a big surprise. It's like, oh, that's it. It's like you've nailed it. You got it. And it feels true to them. And I would say that's pretty much 100% of my experience.
Are these people self-identifying so for example, when they come to you in the first place, are they self-identifying that they don't know what's missing? Or, how do they come across your desk in the first place?
A lot of times it's referral friends that I know who are like, I think we need some help figuring out how to talk about what we're doing, because we know we're doing really good things, and a lot of it is instinctive or gut based, and it's sort of like they just kind of move. They're just kind of moving by instinct, but then if they have to articulate it, or if they have to explain it to somebody, it's like they devolve to tactics, or they devolve to, we're going to put out a report or something that seems it's not the whole picture, and they don't really know how to get at the whole picture. So I would say there have been a few people in my life it been either a presentation that I've done, who've been like, I want that kind of thing. I want to do this stuff differently, and I see that you can take me in a different path. And sometimes it's just referral, and sometimes it's people I already know who've been sort of struggling for a while, and then finally go, do you think you could help me say this differently?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Awesome. Circling back a little bit, so before you started, you talked a little bit about your education, but you were working in corporate previously. Is that correct?
No, I've actually never had a corporate job. I've worked for a lot of, I worked in an agency with corporate clients, but I've only worked in either not-for-profit. Trying to think back to agencies, not-for-profits, and that's really been the bulk of what I've done. And I think I only had maybe 3 jobs before I went out on my own. And so I've been doing this as a solo practitioner for, I guess, about 24 years.
Wow, that's impressive. Was there a moment or like a calling or some sort of instance in time where you can recognize that you realize that this is what you were called to do?
Yeah, I am not a real fan of punching a time clock. I really don't like a lot of that corporate-y formality and stuffiness. It doesn't work for me. I like the flexibility. So when I started having kids and I started working contract, and then I realized for me to work part-time for an agency would mean basically working full-time for the agency and getting paid part-time. And I know myself well enough to know that I'm so I would like to say the word conscientious, but I'm just kind of driven, that I probably would have ended up working too much for the scope of work. And so I just decided, I think I'll probably be better off doing this on my own. And I for whatever reason, never really had a fear about being able to generate the work. And because a lot of it came to me. It was like often unsolicited. And so I sort of got confident that I knew I had something that people wanted. But then also there's a part of me that is, I really like the hunt. I like being able to go out and find opportunities and people who need my work. And I'm pretty good at knocking on the door, doing the cold call, asking someone to refer me, and then giving them like, here's why I'm here. Here's what I see as a problem that I can solve for you. And those can be big things and it can be small things. But I think a lot of it is wiring and just knowing that I really like being independent. I don't like having somebody kind of direct me in any given day. I like the flexibility, given that I'm a mom and just a human being who likes to be able to manage their time. And there are definitely times when being an entrepreneur can be scary, but for 24 years, the work shows up. And it's the other thing about it that I think suits me is I really like the variety. And you just never know. There's always a new problem, a new client, a new sector that you get to learn about. And so I think all of those things kind of play to my strengths. And, sometimes I think that there are lots of people who have like a 25-year plan and they work that plan. But I feel like I kind of just went what feels right now. And that just seemed to I just kept feeling like this is the place, this is the right thing for me to be doing right now. So I've stuck with it.
You mentioned in there something really interesting, which is that finding new work never really scared you. You weren't worried about that next project coming in. And I think most entrepreneurs, that's their biggest fear is where's that next dollar coming from? What's that next project look like? Why do you think you aren't worried about that?
Partly because of my experience. So being in the agency world, I got to test my chops while also being an employee. So we were expected to go out and raise 2.5 times salary, which is, it's a decent amount of money. And so figuring out where the opportunities were and going and chasing it, whether it be from existing clients and morphing those existing projects into bigger ones or finding new ones, I got to test my own mettle in that environment. And so I knew that I could go cold call somebody, go and find them and turn them into a 5-figure client when I was, in my 30s. And so it just seemed like a natural thing for me to be able to do that on my own. Because and the other part of it is, I think because I do good homework. I find a lot of people do cold calling poorly. They'll say, we got this product or this service and we were wondering if you wanted it. Well, no, I don't think that's the way to do it. I typically go into a client and say, I've studied you. I've listened to you on podcasts. I've read all your interviews. I've noticed you've said this or here's what your website looks like, but I think you're missing blah, blah, blah. And so I think what people appreciate is the ability to analyze and do your homework and be invested before you even walk in the door. So you really telegraph to people that you care and you're not just tire kicking. You have something to say. So that's part of, I guess, my drive or my wiring is, again, to solve people's problems and to come alongside them and help them be better. And people seem to believe that, like they trust it. So I guess I've just always had confidence in myself that I could keep that going. And then the other part of this is, I think for me at least, I have found that there's something about never stop learning and never stop evolving as a practitioner or a provider of services. Because the way I started is not where I am today. And if I had stayed doing that, I probably would be out of business now, because the stuff that I was doing then really isn't. I was doing a lot of traditional media, public relations, marketing, which today has morphed into so many different things. And so I think you have to stay one step ahead and understand how you can take advantage of the new emerging opportunities based on what you've learned and based on who you are and based on what the market is or is not providing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that continuous learning is so key to staying ahead. What are some of the ways that you do so? What is it? Is it consuming, I don't know, podcasts? Is it how do you stay on top of what's emerging and ensuring that you're at the top or you're in the know, I suppose?
So for me, a lot of it is, I always, for the longest time, I've said I get paid to read the newspaper. At that time, it was a physical newspaper. Now, I'm very plugged into what's going on social media wise. Who's talking about what? What are their pain points? Who's kind of in that space that's doing some interesting things? And I'll either be influenced positively or negatively by what I'm seeing and go, oh, like there's a better way to do this. From that sort of like contextual, understanding context is important. But then I've always been a reader. I've always been like a researcher. I'm really interested in understanding like whatever the facts are, or cases or case studies or like literal research have to do with different things that I'm working on. So big into that whole space of whether it be like magazine articles or actual like journal articles, peer-reviewed papers, whatever they are, understanding all those pieces. And then I've been able to learn on the go. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about being a consultant, is you get paid to learn. And literally for 24 years, I've been learning on the job. And then you never lose that. You just build on it. But then there are other things that I think that I've done that are a little quirky, like maybe 5 years ago or so, I just started realizing, for me, I can do the research, I do a lot of research, and then I'll do a lot of analysis, and then I'll do the recommendation, and I'll actually build a brand or a strategy. And then I was getting to that place where I would have to articulate this idea to a creative or to another person. And there were too many times when I felt like they weren't capturing it. And so I started to go, you know what? I think I can do this. So I just started to try. I mean, if it hadn't worked out, I would have stopped. But my ability to translate I never remember if it's the left or the right brain, that analytical side to the creative side is another kind of component of how I've evolved, because I can now take it from soup to nuts and develop the creative, working with a designer, but I'll come up with a lot of the creative concepts. Sometimes I'll bounce it off people, but I feel like I've really nailed the creative, and then I'll ask someone to make it better. Like I can give you the general idea and the direction, but then I need someone to make it beautiful. But that's worked really well for me too. And it allows me to maintain like a real nice through line from all the research and the backstory right through to the front end. And that's been like really empowering for me. And I think from a client perspective, like they know that they're getting a lot of continuity, and you don't have 15 people around the table. So that's kind of how I've evolved. And then I did go back to school about 5 years ago or so, and I took a formal master's program in behavioral science. I really wanted to understand that space of how do we actually change human behavior using social psychology. It's fascinating to me. And I was chatting with someone about this idea of behavioral economics literally on the phone one day, and I said, what's behavioral economics? She told me. I went and researched it, and I went, oh, I'm applying. And I did, and I think it was probably within 6 months I was in this new program. And that's really opened a lot of doors for me in terms of how I think differently about problems. It's allowed me to teach. I teach at the post-secondary level, and I think there's a lot of folks in the marketing space who have traditional marketing backgrounds, but they don't have all that other value add. And that's really made a big difference for me in terms of my my ability to find projects and opportunities and speak really confidently about how to handle them differently. So
That do you find that constant learning and that willingness to change up what you're doing and learn new things and deploy those for your clients gives you a competitive edge in the in your market?
for sure. Yeah, I don't really fit a mold. Somebody told me once I am a category of one. And, that's a good place to be when you can go to somebody like me who can say, I can understand and do the research behind a campaign or a project. I can analyze it and make a strategic recommendation from a marketing perspective. But then I can execute. I can literally do soup to nuts. And I think for a lot of people that feels there's a level of confidence, just a sense that there's just more in the offering. You can go and the other piece of the puzzle is I can bring anyone to the table with me, and I'm not tied to a half a dozen people who I have to feed as employees. So it allows me to be really nimble and change up my bench strength based on whatever project I'm doing. So, I can work on a project that's more event kind of public facing, and that's possible, and I can bring the right people around me. But then I can also work on a policy type problem that's more kind of government and more about like government efficacy and how do we make sure we're doing due diligence as a public body. And so I think the more like there's that whole school of thought that you have to be like a mile deep and an inch wide, like really do a deep dive and be a real specialist in your field. And I think that there's value there, but I also think there's value in being really broad. And I guess in some ways I'm both. So yeah, I think that the competitive advantage is there for sure.
When we were talking previously, you discussed an idea that for your clients, you want to go beyond just awareness marketing, and you want to drive real change. What does that mean?
That's a good question. So there's this whole phrase that is often used in the purpose-driven marketing space, and it's the "we're making a difference" phrase, which I really hate because it's so meaningless. Well, how do you know? Is it a good difference or a bad difference? Like, you can make a bad difference. And so I often kind of force people to really imagine what the outcome is that they're trying to achieve. And it can be like changing, like the way people, not just how they are aware of a problem, but how they personally process the problem and react to it in an automatic kind of way. So real change is about understanding like the problem, and then understanding really what are the elements of, what are the indicators of actual progress. So I'll give you an example. Workplace sexual harassment. 40 years of workplace sexual harassment training has produced negative outcomes, including, well, first of all, the numbers have not gone down, but men who take sexual harassment training are more likely to see the behavior as acceptable. Shocking.
Yeah.
And so what works better? Oftentimes what happens in this space is that people will say, here's how we're going to solve workplace sexual harassment. We're going to explain to you what it is. We're going to show you all kinds of pictures and scenarios and videos, and we're going to show you very clearly what it is. We're going to tell you not to do that, and then we're going to tell you what will happen to you if you do. None of that works. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. And it has to do with the way we're wired. We are First of all, we don't like being controlled. And so if there's a sense that you're being coerced in a certain kind of like not doing things or being told basically what to do or what not to do, people react negatively. But the other part of it is that a lot of the ways we frame this is we normalize behavior and we actually make people think that everyone's doing it. And so, well, maybe there's a reason why I should do it too. There's lots of social psychology at play here. But what the research suggests is that a better way to solve workplace sexual harassment is not to talk about it specifically, but to focus more on culture. And if you can create cultures, you focus just on culture and you say, we're going to build cultures that are trusting, respectful, where people feel safe, psychologically safe to be in a space, to show up as themselves. That environment is what is needed to make sexual harassment less likely to happen. And so the outcome of that is you create this solid, positive workplace environment, which helps you be more innovative and effective and take risks and recover from mistakes, all that stuff. And at the same time, a place where people are like, that's not on. Or we know where the line is and we know that that's not, we're over the line, whatever. It's sort of self-policing. And so I think there's not like, how do you know if you're doing good? How do you know if you're making an impact? You have to decide what the indicators of change or indicators of progress are, and then work backwards from that. So I worked with the Alex many years ago, like probably 15 years ago, and helped them do a rebrand. And one of the things that was really fascinating to me about that work is this is a healthcare not-for-profit that works with a lot of folks who are marginalized, might be living on the streets. And a lot of those folks were either unhoused or they were using emergency resources, say fire or police, or they'd walk into a emergency clinic to get help. And so the question is, what does change look like in that environment? And one of the changes was creating an environment where folks felt safe to come to a clinic that wasn't the hospital, and would allow them to provide to get access to care that was really important for them. They went out and put buses on the roads, on the streets, and those were dental buses and health buses. So they went where the people were. But then they also would work with folks and help them like get off. For instance, if you're dealing drugs and you're making $10,000 a month, how do you go from that to zero or to government funding? And some of these folks didn't even know how to use a debit card. They didn't know how to use a thermostat. They didn't know how to use a stove. And so helping them, understanding the tools that they need to get to a place where they can be self-sufficient. That's the kind of stuff you need to understand. And it's not just about providing them with a place to live. That's one step. But then once they're there, how do we make sure that they can live there sustainably, for lack of a better word? So I think you really just have to break down the problem and understand it from the point of view of the person. And it's kind of like design thinking. You start with the user in mind and start with the person in mind. Human beings are complex and not. And oftentimes understanding what naturally motivates people in this space, whether it be a client, a customer, or a patient, we have underlying motivators, and there are things that you don't have to tell me to drink water, right? You don't have to tell me to wash my hands. You don't have to. There are some things that I automatically know how to do. You don't have to tell me to take care of my kids. Like, I'm motivated to do that. And so understanding what's going on under the surface and what do people actually really, really care about, and then giving them that is the essence of behavior change. We often think sometimes we think it's just about awareness, or we think it's about some kind of incentive or carrot or stick, and those work sometimes. But oftentimes it's really just getting under the surface and understanding people, and then seeing where the gaps are, seeing what the needs are, and then giving it to them. So we're coming up in a few days, we're going to be launching a campaign that's across Alberta, and it's a campaign to prevent family violence. Family violence, very complex issue. Perpetrators, victims, shame. There's a lot of complexity around the issue. And the question is, how do you solve that problem? Well, there are some folks who say, well, you need to talk to the perpetrators and you need to tell them not to do that, which is one option. The question is, are the perpetrators open to being being educated and to learning new ways? Probably that's a good question, and maybe the answer is very few are. But then the other side of it is understanding that what the research suggests is one of the best ways to solve the problem can be in how we respond to people who tell. And people who tell, who have the nerve and the guts and the courage to tell someone, are usually going to tell someone like you and me. They're not going to go to a formal organization or call a helpline or do it. They're going to go to a friend or family. Most people don't know what to say. Or they'll give advice, or they'll say something like, well, you should leave, or you should lock the door, change the locks. They give all kinds of opinions, which may or may not be helpful in the time. And so one of the things we know about family violence in particular is if we can equip people like you and me, give them the skills and the confidence to know what to say, then we're more likely to say it. We're more likely to help that person. And that person who gets a positive response or supportive help is less likely to experience repeat incidents and more likely to get help. Okay, so you see how these dots are like, we're connecting the dots for people, but it's not like just tell people don't do family violence. And that's mostly what you see out in that space is, and you see these extremely graphic images, people in danger or people experiencing real-time abuse, which draws you in and makes you click, and it's like really, really intense, and it sticks with you, but it doesn't change behavior. Mm-hmm. And so you really need to take a thoughtful step back and understand the problem, both from a strategic point of view, that sort of whole like where are the levers that we can pull here, but also from a human point of view, what are people who experience this really needing, and what are the people around them needing? And if you can do that, and you can back it up for people. And what I find fascinating about this process is I've never had anyone say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, people get it. When you start to explain to them why we do it this way, everyone says, oh yeah, I get that. It makes sense to me. And then people want to be part of something that works. And so I think I've even lost now the question, but it's really about how do you know if you're doing good, and it's understanding the measures of change. And for this campaign, for instance, we're just measuring public confidence. Right now, we ask people, most people want to help. 76% said, yes, I would help if somebody came to me. That's 3/4 of the population. But about 60%, 59% say, I feel confident in helping. And about less than half say that they have the tools to actually provide resources to folks. And so these are the things where you're noticing where the gaps are, and how do you fill those gaps is part of the challenge of a group that wants to make a difference in the world, and they want to make a tangible difference. So I think measurement's super important, evaluation and reporting is super important.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. I think, a lot of marketers and marketing companies and that sort of thing have a tough time setting those parameters, setting those gauges of success, setting those metrics, So at what point do you set those metrics, and how do you go about doing so?
Yes, it's such a big problem. And one of the things that I'm trying to, I'm a one-person parade trying to change the way people think about these problems. So the first thing is even acknowledging that raising awareness is not really, it's not the solution. In fact, it can be part of the problem. And to say we're in a real conflicted situation often because the expectation of the funder or the client is, we want to go viral. We want lots of clicks. And so clicks and likes and eyeballs are the metrics. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to go in a different direction. You're going to go for the graphic. You're going to provoke. You know, I often say to people, I've said to some folks that I've worked with, if you really want to go viral, you know, all you need to do is get drunk and naked. No problem, like solved. And so really taking the time to think through whether, and help them understand that this isn't going to help. And oftentimes there are journal articles out there. Stanford Review has content that helps people understand that awareness raising isn't the best thing. So I'll often come to, a group might come to me and say, we have funding to raise awareness about a problem. And I'll say, well, the last thing you want to do is raise awareness. Well, they're that's kind of hard for them to hear. But then I'll help them say, here's what you do want to do. And then we'll walk back and I'll map it out for them. And I'll give them all the citations, and I'll help them understand the research, and I'll help them understand the strategy. And here's why we're doing it this way. And here's the outcomes that we want to measure. And I have enough now experience and tangible proof that I've done this before, that people are very willing to kind of follow along and move in a better direction. And I often find that folks in this space are relieved, because they're like, thank you, that this is often, I tend to put a positive spin on the messages, and there's a whole reason for using positive psychology when you want to change behavior. I'm guessing you can imagine what those reasons are. And there are a lot of times people in this space are like overwhelmed by all the negative messages, because life and the problems that we have to solve in this world are big and complex and scary sometimes. And it can just be so overwhelming for folks. And so when you come and you say, I can solve this problem and I can do it using a positive message frame, it's a breath of fresh air, literally. And it kind of draws people like flies to honey.
Yeah. In a world where there's low barrier to entry to marketing services, whatever that may be, the entire umbrella, and obviously companies wanting to cost save as well. Do you find that you're often going into environments or solving problems that have been butchered in the past, or maybe that people have been burned by marketing services in the past?
Yeah. And, you have to be pretty diplomatic in those situations. Sometimes people know and sometimes they don't. And it's just one of those things where people sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And they mean well. And, they might be, like, I'm working right now with a client that wants to do something really interesting in the environmental space. And they've done a bit of research already, but it's not clear that the questions they've been asking are really the relevant questions. And the people they've been talking to are really the ones who can make substantive change in the space. And so what do? You go, okay, well, let's look at what you've got and let's reimagine how you can maybe we can salvage pieces of this, but we want to go in a new direction, and here's where we want to go. I think mistakes happen, and I think people are willing to go, okay, well, I guess either we paid for something we shouldn't have or whatever. But I think you just want to give them a sense of encouragement and inspiration that, okay, all is not lost. We can redo this, we can rework it, and you're going to have a better experience and a better outcome in the process. You know what the coolest thing about this work for me is that, like I say, I often show people who they are, organizations who they are, and what happens after that is powerful. Like, one client said to me, you helped us see who we are, and we became bolder in how we talked. and confident in how we talked and different we knew what made us different. We knew what made us special. We knew what made us effective at our work. When you can articulate that, I always say it's when you have clarity, you gain confidence. And when people respond to confidence. And so to me, it's like so exciting to be able to give that gift to somebody and say, now you know who you are and what the magic is in what you do. Here are the tools for taking that to the next level. And so, yeah, I guess in a way, I wish sometimes that, and one of my goals in life is to work with marketers one-on-one. So I do teach my peers. So I've turned my competitors into clients. And I have an online course, and I teach at the university. I teach marketers, and I call them my dandelions. You are my dandelions. I want you to go out and spread good in the world and not do evil. And you know, I guess ultimately I'd like that. I've probably influenced hundreds of folks. I'd like to influence thousands and maybe tens of thousands. I'm not done yet.
Amazing. In the work that you do, it sounds like it's transformational change, right? You're driving change. And so I wonder, obviously the start point is clear, but is there a point where a client graduates from needing your services, or are you often working with these people long term?
Yeah, I often work on multi-year campaigns and projects. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, often the goal is to let them be self-sufficient. As long as you can give them tools. Sometimes they can take those tools and work them for years. It's a bit of both.
Okay. The age-old question, marketers marketing themselves. We're in a similar industry in video production where, but we don't have any videos about ourselves or our own services, that sort of thing. How do you go about marketing yourself?
Yeah.
Or do you?
Yeah. I guess my platform is LinkedIn. I do enjoy it. I tend to be the one who offers a lot of content, here's how, for years 10 years, I did this thing called the Marketing Minute, and it was a 1 minute Monday morning thing. And I always threw different things at people, like questions about, like, do you know one of the best words you can use in one of the most popular words you can use in marketing is you? Well, not hard to guess why, but just things like that. Like, what's the research behind that, or like the word because. If you ask somebody for a favor or to ask them to do something, and then you say because, well, that word because increases the number of people who say yes by 50%, something like that. And so understanding like those little whys is really interesting for me. Taking a different approach on problems, like one of the things I've written in the past is don't start with why, start with how. Because I think a lot of people can say, well, why they want to do something, but they often miss the how piece, and the how is what people really pay for and what makes you unique. And it's some of those things that are often overlooked but really powerful in terms of creating outcomes. And so I've been pretty good about like triggering curiosity, being a bit of a iconoclast, like taking a contrary view to most organizations and people who do certain things. But I try to tread carefully on it, because you can come across as looking like you're throwing stones or being just like a bit of a critic for no reason. And so I think that's been my space. I do a fair amount of speaking, some paid, some not. And some of those turn into projects and work, and some of them don't. But honestly, for me, a lot of my marketing is word of mouth, referral, networking, asking people who I know, who I've worked with in the past, to say, I think there's a problem here that I'd like to help solve. Can you introduce me to so-and-so? And here's what I want to say to them. And here's the email. Or they'll literally call people up for me and say, I think you should talk to her because I think she's onto something and she's got a new solution and da-da-da. So part of it is, I think, having done the work and being able to show people that I know what I'm talking about helps open doors. I wish I were the kind of person who could do the walk and talk and weigh in on any given topic of the day. I, I'm never really sure how effective that kind of stuff is. I know you can have tons of content out there. Does it translate into stuff? What I found, the course that I've done has translated into work as well. And so I find, I guess I'm trying to be really targeted in what I put my effort and time into. And that's what I found has worked for me, is that LinkedIn platform, the course itself, and then just a lot of networking and word of mouth. And you know what else is really interesting? And I just thought of this. A lot of times the work that I do I do a lot of qualitative interviews. So like you're doing with me, I'll sit down with someone for an hour and I'll say, tell me about your work, or tell me about working with this organization. What do you like about it? What do you know? And in that process, you learn so much about what's going on in the community that you actually find opportunities then to weigh in on, or to find open doors in new sectors. So it's kind of like that. It's just like flying around and seeing where the opportunities are.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something in there, which was being intentional with your time and not just kind of trying everything, but, being qualitative and determining where the highest impact is going to be, which I really resonate with.
Yeah.
When it comes to clients, what does an ideal client, or is there like a criteria that you go through to ensure that, you are a good fit to work together?
Yeah, I started the business with saying I want to work with people who want to change the world. And so that's kind of my criteria. Is I don't really want to work with people who just want to play it safe. I like risk takers. I like people who want to go big. And I guess a little bit of that is like-minded folks tend to find one another. And so I end up often talking to people who are kind of wired that way. And they're doing stuff on their own, and I can just tell that they need help. So often it's kind of like whether or not you want the same thing I want, because like I have limited time and I'm on this earth for a limited time frame as well. I just really want to have the maximum impact. Are you and I compatible in wanting that kind of impact? Because if you just want to be on the front page of the Calgary Herald, then that's not enough for me. But the other side of it is that there are sometimes I meet people who might not actually be wired that way, but I think I can push them. And that's interesting to kind of get a sense of whether or not you feel somebody trusts you enough to kind of wander along with you down a path of bigger and better. Like one of the first projects I ever worked on was a campaign called I Believe You, which was funded by the province of Alberta, but through an agency called the Association of Alberta Sexual Assault Services. And I met the CEO, and I'd worked with her a few years. And I just could tell that she was the kind of person. She's smart, she got it, she was willing to kind of go along with my direction and guidance. And those are the kind of people that I like working with. Not people who kind of go, look, we want to do these 3 things in these 3 ways, and we need someone to do it. Is that you? No, it's not me. Like, if you are coming to me with a wide open hand or posture, and to say, we want to do this big thing, we don't exactly know how, and we don't exactly know how long it'll take, and we don't know how much money it's going to, we don't know anything, but we want to talk about it. Well, that to me is exciting. That's the kind of people I like. And so, I don't know, I guess I can work pretty much with anyone, but I really, really like working with people who are open and flexible and creative and willing to do a bit of risky things and think big. Like, I think you have to think big in order to achieve big things. And for whatever reason, I've never been shy of thinking big.
Have you ever had a situation where maybe you misgauged or misread a client that you did proceed to work with? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, being able to bel at least at the beginning, maybe sensing that somebody had a big idea or was open to challenging some status quo stuff. And then maybe at some point you just get the sense that either they're stalling or they're not jumping in on this. And that's just a signal, I guess, to say either maybe you gave them something that felt too big, or maybe it felt like not authentic to them. But honestly, I think that some of the challenges there have been organizations often think about what they need to hear and they want to say, but they don't always really think about what their audience needs to hear and say. And I know that I've always been like 100% tuned in with the audience. And sometimes it's whether or not you can get the client to tune into the audience and really like embrace what the audience is telling them. That can be like really hard and really like sad and like just sad when you think that you've shown them where the opportunity is and they either don't want to take it or don't feel like it's their role to take it. That those can be tough.
Definitely. What is the hardest part? You've been doing it, you mentioned 25 years, which is an incredible amount of time. What is the hardest part about being self-employed?
Well, it takes a lot of self-motivation. There are days when you're like, I feel like I've been banging on this door. There are times when projects take a long time to get off the ground. It can take months, sometimes even more than a year. And you just have to be a bit of a pit bull when it comes to grabbing onto an idea and not letting it go. So that constant need to keep encouraging yourself, motivating yourself to keep going. And there's nobody around. Like I know people who are partners and they have like a small little cohort of staff, and I don't have that. And so a lot of it is me having to just keep deciding I'm going to get back in the game today, or I'm going to stay in the game today, or I'm going to keep charging ahead even when it feels like I'm tired, or it feels like this is taking too long. I don't know what that is. I guess it's just like sheer perseverance. And that word grit has been written about before. I think it comes down to grit for me. I don't fall down easily. And when I do, I get back up. And I guess I just have a real firm, like I have a faith. I believe that I'm here for a reason. I believe that I'm here to help. I believe that I'm here to do a job. And there's a higher calling for me. And so you just got to keep going when you got that going for you. It's not just a job. It's not just some way that I make money. And I often think I'm kind of getting at that point where I go, that word retirement, what does it mean? I don't know that I ever really want to retire. I like to think that at some point I could become like maybe morph into more of a teacher, doing more teaching, having a broader audience for teaching. So that just sort of sense of purpose is part of what drives me.
That grit, I love that word. Do you think that's something that's like developed over time, or is it something that you're born with and you just, you have that conviction?
Yeah, I kind of feel like you're born with it. I remember being scrappy as a kid and just being really determined and having my own opinion about stuff and seeing stuff that didn't seem right to me and calling it, like when I was 12, So I don't know. I think there are some people who just they're wired to do the 9 to 5 and be that steady, solid employee, and that's all good. Not everyone is wired to, to kind of change the world. But for me, I've noticed that it's definitely been something I've grown up with my whole life.
What does success look like to you?
Wow, that's a good question. It can be really tough because when you're self-employed, it's easy to let your work and your work life and your life, your other life, your social life blend together. And kids, and how do you be a good mom while you're still being a good consultant, entrepreneur? I guess I'll start on the business side. I feel like for me, a lot of it has to do with scale. And I can be happy doing my projects, but I like scale. I like to make a big impact. I've done a fair number of things that are provincial in scope, but I am starting to do some things that are potentially going to have some international scope, which is cool. And so I'm always looking for those. I guess for me, it's just that sense of progress and personal development, professional development. So that's how I gauge it. It's not always just the cash flow or the revenue. It's really figuring out where you feel like you can make the biggest impact. And then on the child side, on the family side, it's being intentional and really thinking through how you help your kids develop and how it's all that whole, not necessarily about quality time or quantity time, but to me, it's about like really how do you show up in the world in a way that your kids want to model and emulate you. And I guess that probably is success for me. It's like I find that my kids are a little bit different in terms of the way they show up in the world. They have big hearts, and they're good, solid, thoughtful, wise people. And that to me is success.
That's an incredible description. That's great. What's next for you? What's coming down the pipeline? Do you have any exciting projects on the go or anything like that?
Yeah, like it's been a really actually busy fall. Last year was kind of not a great year for me. It was one of the slowest years, even though I went out and did my usual. Some of them just didn't stick, but this year they're sticking. And there's some work like I'm going to keep it kind of vague, but there's some work in the not-for-profit space, which is kind of cool, public-facing event that could, I don't know what could rival, but like kind of like a beakerhead kind of opportunity potentially. And then I've got a project with a for-profit organization, and it's based here in Calgary and Toronto, and helping them articulate what they're up to and build a visual identity and some brand work with them. And then some work in quite a bit of work in the not-for-profit space around brand building and articulating the value proposition, the case for support. Why should we give you money instead of everyone else? And then doing some work in the social innovation space, social intervention space, and doing more of a kind of an analysis of what's been going on in certain jurisdictions and helping people understand how to do it differently. So those are some of the things that are on the horizon for me. All exciting. Like I really like working with individuals. I really like working on big scale projects, and then I've got my teaching work, and I'm trying to figure out a way to how to scale my courses. It's tough because the courses are live, but there's a desire by some of the folks that I've worked with in the past to build a community of practice, is what they're calling it. And the idea that we can create a bit of a cohort of folks who do what I do, who want to learn more, and kind of building out that network. And that's one of the things that I'm doing, trying to equip and build skills in these folks so that they can go out and do what I do. And that's probably the other measure of success for me, is how many other folks are out there and doing better things because of what they've learned from me.
Love it. If you were able to go back in time to when you first started doing what you do now and give yourself a piece of advice that you've learned along the way, what would that be?
When I first started, I think one of the things that I thought I wanted was a true agency, like a brick and mortar, whatever, 10 people around a boardroom on a given day and doing that whole thing. I think that to me, there was that sort of outer trapping of success when it looked like you were succeeding. But then when I started to do the math, and I was like, after you pay all the bills over here, you're going to work yourself really hard for about the same amount of money. And I don't really love managing folks. And so I guess that idea that to think about what does success look like, I don't know that I really did it at the front end, but I kind of came around to it. I guess that would be my advice to myself or anyone. It would be to say, and I was chatting with someone today who's a new entrepreneur. He's been at it for a couple years maybe, and we were Zooming and he was in a hoodie, and he said, apologies, I'm going for a run after this, and because I'm self-employed and I can go for a run at lunchtime instead of waiting until whatever. That's a measure of success for him. So really understanding like that good question about what does success look like here, and getting really like being convinced of that and sticking with it. Because for me, the biggest reason that I did my own thing, and I have done my own thing for this long, is because I wanted to be able to go and watch my kids play the little Red Riding Hood in their school play. I wanted to be able to show up at a hockey game whenever it was, and wanted to be around watching and being part of their lives in the day-to-day as well as the big stuff. And so for me, maximum flexibility was key. And I guess that's probably what motivated me at the beginning. It still motivates me now. I have a 12-year-old and still in the thick of it. So yeah, that's kind of the North Star of a lot of this work, is remembering that you're here for really getting really clear yourself. Like to your point about your own marketing, I have said to people, like my little brand message is ideas that change the world, good ideas that make the world better, and good ideas for a better world. I'm not even getting my own phrase right, but the idea is that's what I'm up to, and you can never stop doing good stuff. Like when do you want to stop that? Whoever wants to stop that. So I would never want to trade that in for 9 holes every third day or every other day. Like to me, these are just more exciting, more fun things. So the good news is it's all worked out for me, and I still keep finding new opportunities. So I guess hopefully that's not going to change for a long time.
Yeah, well, it's clear you're passionate about what you do, and you're impact driven, which means you're having an impact and spreading positivity and that sort of thing. So it's incredible to see. Where can we send people to follow along? What's coming up for you, and keep in touch, I suppose.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place, Joni Avram. And then I have a website, it's called Cause and Effect. No, it's causeeffect.ca. So 2 words smashed together.ca. All my stuff is there. But if you really want to follow me and get my content, it's on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joni, for this conversation. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Aiden. It's fun.